Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of Catherine Ormer's Guide to Life podcast. So this week I am doing podcast and it's about several missing people actually. I popped into Google because obviously Google knows everything. A list of kind of like people who are missing or, and I just thought, it's a kind of these people sometimes get forgotten about. And I thought, well, we'll start with kind of like June. June seems like a good month. June 2000, May 2000, and September 2000. 3 women that have gone missing. And we'll have a look at some of their details. Because we need to know what happened to these people, because these people have got families, and it's important to find out, I'm just kind of like, there's somebody out there that's maybe done something to these people and they're still walking around living their life free, which to me is just wrong. It's so wrong. So this podcast will be going out on the 6th of December. Amazingly, I'm being really, really organised and I'm recording it on the 2nd of November, which is really, really organised for me. The reason I'm doing that is because I'm seriously busy. I've actually written out an 8-week schedule. I need to get everything recorded by the end of November because I've got so much to do that's going on. Right, so let's have a look. Kellie Pratt. Right, so Kellie Pratt has been missing from the Norwich area since the 11th of June 2000. Okay, so she's missing. No one knows where she is. And you know what? Why don't we just sit for a moment? No matter what, her occupation or who she was, the fact is that she's missing. Now, can you imagine? Because I say, sometimes we become, I think I've mentioned this before, we become slightly desensitized from things that are actually happening and we see them on screen and they don't really mean anything. Can you sit down now and imagine if one of your children or friends has gone missing, okay? And you don't know what happened to them. How would that feel? And imagine 25 years on, okay, you still don't know what happened to them. You don't know if they're alive or if they're dead. You're assuming they're probably dead, but they've never been found. So you've never really been able to sort of say goodbye, to grieve, to let go. All of those emotions that need to be processed, you can't do them because you don't know what happened to that person. So have a think about that. Okay, and then I'll continue. So I did quite a bit of research into all of these ones coming up. And in fact, all of my podcasts, they're not just a spur of the kind of moment reading off my phone. I've actually done a lot of research into all of them. I know it's not like me, getting a bit more organised. Reports suggested that she thought someone might have been watching her shortly before her disappearance, okay? Which is a little bit disturbing. But that's the problem, isn't it? How do you tell if you're being watched by somebody? You don't always know that, do you? I'm so busy like rushing around with my day, doing this, doing that. You see somebody, especially at night, you see somebody, a car, you can't really see who the car is. Maybe it follows you for a few turns. How do you know if you're actually being followed by somebody? Okay. It's actually quite difficult. And in hindsight, I know there was a case recently where a girl was killed, I think, at the stables. Not near me. I think I'm going to say Nottingham. It might have been that area. And she'd been stalked by somebody that she worked with. And she didn't know, but then it transpires this is what had happened. Because you don't always know, do you? Right, so she had a long-term partner, though, okay, and she had 2 sons with him, and they live with him, okay, and so they'd obviously split up. She was originally from Newcastle, and she'd had a family with a guy who was a bit older than her, and so they'd split up and then she's gone off to move to Norwich where her mum was. And as I say, just as she was about to be allowed access to the boys again, okay, she mysteriously disappeared. So she was originally from Newcastle. She grew up in, I think it's Biker, and she went to Heaton Manor School. And when she left school, she worked in the care sector. She worked in a care home in Gosforth. And then age 17, she met Michael Pratt, who was the partner who she had 2 children with her. So he was a bit older than she was. And they were together for 9 years. So she's had like a long-term relationship with this guy, had 2 children. They never married, but she did use his surname. And then, as I say, she moved to Norwich when they separated in 1998. So she'd be closer to her mum. Obviously, her mum's getting a bit older. And unfortunately, when she was in Norwich, she developed a heroin habit. And she was actually imprisoned for shoplifting. On release from prison, she then became a sex worker to fund her heroin habit. Now, she was last seen outside the Rose pub in Queen's Road, Norwich, and she took a call from a punter. At least we're assuming it's a punter. They were never traced. 10 minutes after this sighting at 23:30, okay, she got the call. And then she was never seen or heard from ever again. Now, in October 2001, Hayley Curtis also went missing from the same area that Kellie worked in. And she was a 23-year-old sex worker who was found in a shallow grave in Hampshire. But somebody else was actually found guilty of her murder. So that might just be a coincidence. So if you do know anything about Kellie, what happened to her, do you know what? Now's the time really to come forward, and tell people what it is that you know or suspect. Okay, so now moving on to somebody else that's disappeared. And again, if you do have any information about this case, it's 0800 0468 999. Sorry, Wikipedia let me down. It's actually 0800 555 111 for Crime Stoppers. You can, leave some information about any crime. You don't even have to phone the local police force. So, on the 2nd of May 2000, Nicola Ray, another mum of 2, disappeared after a night out with friends in Basildon. Now, originally her fiancé, Mr. Timothy Barnes, was treated as a suspect, but no charges were ever brought. She left a friend's house in the early hours of the 2nd of May 2000, and there haven't been any reported sightings of her ever since. What happened to her? Do you know, somebody must know or must suspect something. And do you know what? It takes a lot of courage, actually, to come forward and say, do you know what? I suspect this person of doing this thing. I don't really have any evidence, okay? But it's just, things adding up or things making sense. And, it's, really, if it's been playing on your mind, then you kind of have a duty to actually report these things, don't you? And to kind of say, listen, then at least you've done it, haven't you? You've ticked that box, and you know what? It gives you a clear conscience, because you're like, do you know what? I suspect this person of doing a few things. I don't have any proof. I just think that he probably has, or she probably has. And get in touch and just say, right, okay, and offload it. Say, right, this is what I know. This is what I've worked out. These are the things that don't add up and don't feel right. Because at the end of the day, the police don't know kind of like what happens in people's private lives or conversations that are heard. And if you did hear something about any of these cases, or you remember something, or something just didn't sit right with you, let the police know. Quite often, if you don't even have to speak to somebody. Okay, quite often you can just send like a message through. I mean, yeah, you have to use your email address. They might get in contact with you, but you can just put it all down in like an email via an online platform. One of the local police send it over to the local platform. Maybe have a chat with a PCSO. Is that right? I think so. And my experience is they're lovely. They're really, really helpful about different things. I had a little bit of interaction because we had a break-in at a local supermarket, and they wanted me to check my camera footage. And I know I couldn't speak highly of the police force in my area. They're absolutely fantastic. So don't be afraid to get in touch and let them know. And the only reason they can't usually do anything is because they don't have enough evidence, okay? And I know people get a little bit cross because they don't get evidence, but getting evidence is really difficult. So, you have to help them out as much as you possibly can. Now I'm going to move on to Vicky Glass. Okay, and there's a whole website about Vicky. She was 21 when she disappeared from Middlesbrough in September 2000. Okay. And her body was later found on the North Yorkshire Moors. She was born in Stockton-on-Tees. When she went to Blakeston Secondary School, she was sporty and she had a keen interest in running. And she worked really hard during her education. And she got 5 GCSEs. This is pretty good. She worked in a sweet and savoury factory in Teesside. She was a musician and she played in the jazz band when she was a teenager. So there's loads of information. Go and have a look on the website about Vicky and see all the information that's up there. Okay. Now, on first appearances, she seemed quite quiet and shy. But then people she knew, she was bubbly, described as having a heart of gold. Again, she had parents, who loved her very much. Now, she was a Michael Jackson fan. She had a rescue cat called Sutty. Imagine what the cat must have thought. Where's she gone? I mean, I think Pippa would be absolutely mortified if something happened to me, given how clingy she's been. Pippa, if you don't know, is my black Labrador after I've been on holiday for a week. She's been really clingy. Paranoid that I'm going to leave her somewhere, I think. So when Vicky was 18, unfortunately, she started to take drugs. And this included heroin. And there is a factor here, isn't there? Heroin just seems to be a massive, massive issue. And to fund her addiction, she turned to sex work. Again, we see, there's kind of a common theme here. People getting addicted to drugs, addicted to heroin, and then having to fund their addiction by sex work. Now, she was known to frequent in Cannon Park in Middlesbrough. And she was often seen in a HGV overnight lorry park. Now, on the 21st of September, she celebrated her 21st birthday, while still doing sex work over that weekend. Now, just to put it in some context, okay, she did actually live in a secure housing area. She had someone that was looking after her and doing a lot of work with her. So, things aren't kind of as bad as they seem. And who knows, had she been there a bit longer, then maybe she might have come off the heroin. We just don't know. Thing is, she didn't actually get that chance. On the 23rd of September 2000, Vicky met a few clients that night, and she was last seen by a taxi driver at 4:20 a.m. on Union Street and Eastwood Square, which is near to the rear of a pub called the Shipmate. Okay, now this taxi firm was a local firm that she used and trusted. So she'd built up kind of a rapport with some of the drivers. And obviously the taxi driver went back to his base. Now at 6 a.m. on Friday, the 3rd of November, her body was found by a dog walker in Danby, a village in North Yorkshire. So you got to think, for a start, it's somebody that's got maybe local knowledge of that village, Danby. Why leave her there? That must have some kind of significance for him. And it may be, we've already had a few sex offenders and murderers that have been convicted of various crimes. It could be that maybe he's already in prison. But at least her body has been found. So people that she knew and her parents know what happened to her. Okay? So as horrific as the crime as it is, and the fact that no one's ever been caught, they were actually able to say goodbye and bury her, which is not the case for Nicola Ray. You know, her 2 kiddies, no idea what happened to their mum. And also Kellie Pratt, again, 2 kiddies, no idea what happened to their mum. And I mentioned in my podcast the week before, Nicola Ray, who was killed when her son was 5, and the consequences of that killing, potentially on his life, because he's now in prison. So it's had a massive impact. Probably got a lot of anger there, maybe. Lack of maternal love. Who knows? We don't know, do we? So it's not just for the sake of, finding out what happened to Kellie and Nicola and Vicky as well. But also it's the families that are involved in this. Their lives are completely changed forever. You don't know what's happened to that person. And I just wanted you to think about that. Think about what it would feel like, okay, if there was somebody, a relative of yours or a friend of yours who went missing today. How would that make you feel? And then just try and imagine, say maybe 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 25 years, still not knowing what had happened. You may be still, every time the door goes to open, you're thinking, is it them? So these are real people that something has happened to. So if you do have any information about any of these cases that I have talked about today on my podcast, I'll get the right number this time. It's 0800 555 111, which is the number for Crime Stoppers. Okay, and you can phone up, leave a message, or say you can, go and get some more information. There's probably, if you have a look at the Vicky Glass website, there's probably even a way that you can contact somebody using that website, because obviously they're actively trying to, get some more information. And it may be something or nothing. You might just have a tiny piece of information that that's always been on your mind, and you've thought, I wonder if, and just let someone know. Okay, that's all you have to do. Because it could be, if you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, okay, and, you've got maybe, say you've got half of the pieces, but you don't actually have the other half of the pieces. And then all it takes maybe is for a few more people to come forward with little bits of information, okay, that then make up the entire puzzle. Those little pieces of information, which may seem quite trivial to you and inconsequential, but you've never told anyone about them, then actually, come on, let's do something. Let's tell somebody about these things that you think, okay, I know sometimes you're thinking, I don't want to get in trouble, but lives have moved on, and you're probably not even friends with the people you were friends with before. You maybe don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to end up in court. There's all sorts of different things. But you can give this information anonymously if you don't want anybody to know who you are. And it's better for the police to have these missing parts of the jigsaw puzzle, okay, because it may lead to the overall picture. And although you may think that it's maybe a little bit inconsequential, it might not be. It might actually be key. It could be the piece in the centre that they've been looking for. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. It's been a little bit of a serious one. Sorry for that, guys. But, there are so many victims out there that we seem to have forgotten about, and we hear it on the news, and it's like, yeah, and then something else takes over the news for the next day, and it's put in the past, and then the years move on. But these people still haven't been found. Whoever harmed them, they still haven't been caught, and that's not really right. So let's do something about that. Okay, so this has been Catherine Lorimer's Guide to Life podcast, and I'll have a nice week, everyone, and I'll catch you next time.